Talk about the discipline of worship tonight. The discipline of worship. What page is that in your notes? 59. 58. We're just going to keep going down. I really like what Chuck Swindoll says about worship. Swindoll says, we are a generation that worships its work, works at its play, and plays at its worship. It's a powerful thought. We do almost define ourselves by our work. And man, don't get in somebody's way when they're planning a vacation. We work at that, man. But when it comes to actually worshiping God, we struggle. We struggle to take it seriously. We struggle to make it really about God. Our greatest problem in worship is that we are self-centered. And so when we're worshiping, even when we're worshiping, we thank God for what He did for us recently. I used to toy around and I used to sing a song to myself when I was particularly arrogant, which was most days. You know, I exalt me, I exalt me. And then I actually found that, believe it or not, in video form.
It is all about you. Now, the greatest collection of me worship ever assembled on one CD. It's all about now, I lift my name up. All 20 songs, all about you. This amazing collection is great to share with friends, if you have any. Everyone can join in the worship with you, for you, and about you, because you are unique, and you love you. There is none like me. All this for only $19.95. Operators are standing by to serve you. And I am why I sing, and I am why I live. If you order now, you'll also receive a second CD of Yuletide favorites. Call 1-800-ME-ME-ME or order online at memyselfdie.com. Call today because no one can praise you like you.
They even have hymns, yes. Yes. So I say all that just to help us to understand that when we talk about worship, it really isn't about us. And the great struggle is to actually focus on God. And even, I hate to use the word, but even self-consciously, much of what we do in worship tends to be self-centered. And we have to ask God to rid us of that. I've written down some genuine pleasures from authentic or genuine worship. Probably the greatest thing that will happen to you and I in genuine worship, authentic worship, is we gain a proper perspective of God and ourselves. You'll remember in Isaiah chapter 6, the first few verses, Isaiah sees a vision of God. I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and the train of His robe filled the temple. And the seraphim were singing, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God of hosts. That's a beautiful picture. And immediately after that, Isaiah talks about the fact that he basically hits the floor and says, I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell among a people of unclean lips. So real worship actually sets the world straight and helps me to understand that what's happening on the planet is not really about me. You know, it would be great if normally I said, boy, what's happening in Egypt, how's that going to affect the glory of God? But I go, what's happening in Egypt? how's that going to affect the price of gas at the pump? Why? Because I'm not as concerned about the price or the glory of God as I am about the price of gas at the pump. That's my struggle. A second thing that happens as I worship in an authentic way is I experience supernatural change. And it's always good to have a Bible. If you can take that Bible and turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18. There is an interesting verse there that talks about what happens when you're in the presence of God. 2 Corinthians 3:18. I'm going to read it tonight from the New International Version. Ooh. It says, "And we, who with unveiled face all reflect the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his likeness with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit." But the picture there is that we're seeing God, that's worship, and the product is real change in me. Real change in me as I view the one true God. Psalm 16 verse 10 says, "In your presence is fullness of joy." So I experience great joy as I worship authentically. And then I'm also involved in that which is good and fitting. Psalm 92, 1 and 2 says it's good and fitting for us to worship him. And then I fulfill the major purpose for my existence. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, "Whether you eat or you drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." The reason why I am here is to glorify God. That's why I'm here. That is my purpose for existence. So if I fulfill that purpose, I am fulfilling why I'm here. If I don't fulfill that purpose, I'm missing my whole reason for existence. Well, what are the possibilities with reference to genuine worship? At the last part of 1 John, and 1 Johnny, as I like to call him, or Little John, was written in around, we think, 75 to 90 AD. The last words of 1 John 5:21 are, "Little children, keep yourselves from idols." Now, in the first century, the Christians came out of paganism. They either came out of Judaism, and they had worshipped the one true God and found fulfillment or found Christ as Messiah, but an increasing number of them came out of paganism. So the temptation was to go back to worshiping their pagan idols, because it's what they knew. You can imagine the difficulty if every year at a certain time you and your family got together and you worshipped a pagan god or goddess and you knew it didn't mean anything. And now that time of year comes around again. You're a Christian now. They say, "Well, you know, you coming by Tuesday for solstice?" Yeah, we're coming by for solstice. What are we going to do at solstice? Solstice is the celebration of the longest day of the year. Shortest day of the year, I'm sorry. And so you come by and, you know, we're going to worship the sun god. Did you bring anything for our kids for solstice? We brought little Johnny a solstice doll, the sun god, and that the pressure would be there to conform. And so John says to these individuals, keep yourselves from idols, because they will entrap you. Sadly, his admonition works or is necessary for us today, because we could worship the pagan gods like the Romans. We don't so much, because we're more sophisticated. We have our own gods, don't we? I can worship things. It's Rudy and Angela's new car. No, it doesn't. It doesn't fit in the driveway. That's why I used to clean out the back of the church here. When I worship things, that's called materialism. It's not paganism, but it is a worship of something. It's materialism. I get my worth or my value by what I own or do not own. And believe me, you don't have to have money to have a problem with things. You can be dirt poor and have a problem with things. That's materialism. I can also worship pleasure. My God, Philippians 3:19, can be my belly. My goal in life is the newest buzz. Whatever is going to make me happy. That's called hedonism. I can worship mankind. I can put my faith and trust in human institutions. Government, the UN, our collectiveness. I have a friend on Facebook from high school, and he's basically into all the Eastern religions. And he just feels like if we could all just hold hands and think good thoughts, the world would be as one. The problem is if we all came together, we wouldn't think good thoughts. So it's probably not what we need to have happen. But there is that thought that mankind is the measure of all things, that we have created our own gods. And in that, we miss the real one true God. And we can worship nature. We have taught our kids about Mother Nature, haven't we? Is there a Mother Nature? Nor Father Time. If this is new to some of you tonight, I don't want to... all right, Phil, put your hands over your ears. There's also not Father Christmas. I'm sorry, Phil. just messing with you. But in Acts chapter 17, we find the Apostle Paul on Mars Hill, and he's talking about the one or the religions of the day. And he says, to set forth the record in talking about the one true God, he says, for in him we live and move and have our being. See, pantheism says, everything is God. And, God is everywhere. God's in that wood. God's in this chair. God's in you. God's in me. God's in the frogs in the ocean. And the reality is God is separate from that. And within him, that is under his watchful eye, we live and move and have our being. He's not part of it. He's separate from it. I can worship government. We call that socialism. Government's going to solve the whole problem. They're the whole deal. And Peter, in dealing with this, and remember, Peter dealt with the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire deified the emperor. The emperor was godlike. And Peter said, fear God, honor the king. Fear God, honor the king, but don't worship the king, is what he's saying. Worship God. And then we can worship the one true God, and that's what we want to do. Now, in the discussion that's going to follow, I'm going to emphasize worshiping God corporately. Now, do we worship God privately? Yes. We should. We should. And we must understand, though, that there is an element of worship that is missing when we are not involved corporately in worshiping God.